Hi everybody, and we are live. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Sorry for being late there. It's I see someone just telling me time to start the show. I don't know. There's a few jokes going around. Anyway, there was a couple of sources that had escaped me, and I wanted to include them because I'd just be annoyed if they weren't in there. And I had to kind of find them. I had them to hand earlier, so I had to just go looking for them. Anyway, hope you're all well. Let me know if you can hear and see me okay. Just give me the 5x5 there. And then I will get started. I'm going to have a sip of tea. There we go. Thank you. So, I usually stay away from kind of American politics, or I don't know, foreign politics in a way. I'll touch off of them, but one of my kind of hallmarks is that I like to stick to Irish stuff, and this will kind of stick to Irish stuff. I am going to talk about I'm going to allude to the title as I've titled this video. Is Ireland a racist country? We'll get to that. But I'm setting this up with a bit of a discussion about the shooting in Minneapolis. George Floyd. I'm just checking. I haven't gotten his name wrong. He is George Floyd, yeah. In America, I think it's in Minneapolis. It's in Minnesota anyway. It's American. One of these police shootings of a black male, and kind of my thoughts. Why am I getting? Oh yeah, it's my WhatsApp. No, I'm going to turn that off. So again, it's something I would usually stay away from for various reasons. It's just like whatever. Doesn't have a bearing. And actually, this is the irony. I'm not going to talk about that because for all the issues we have in Ireland, this isn't our fight. It's not our thing. It's not our business. So I'm not going to defend it or promote it or whatever it is, right? I'm not going to have a stance on that because that's an American thing. I talk about Irish stuff. Why integrate the American discourse into Irish discourse needlessly? But the thing that kind of has occurred in the last couple of days since the riots began in Minneapolis, and the whole controversy has begun, is that a lot of Irish progressives or shit libs or rad libs, whatever you want to call them, people have caught on to this, and they've decided to adopt it as an issue, right? And that is both true for political activists, kind of savvy political activists and people like that, or campaigners and NGOs, all of that, maybe some media, but it's also actually bled its way into kind of a parallel track. It's all over Instagram, it's all over TikTok, it's a fashion accessory basically at this point. So for the people who aren't deeply political, it's almost more of a poisonous, toxic thing. Because it's one thing when you see the activist getting all hyped up about it, they're kind of insincere anyway. But it's actually the more sincere social media user, a lot of them young women. There's actually something, this is why I was late, because there's something else has just occurred to me even now that I do want to bring up. So I'm just going to talk as I do it. But so it's all over social media. You have young girls and lads as well, I suppose, but generally young people who aren't massively informed, whether it's left, right, or indifferent. They're just not highly informed people, right? They're not political, cultural analysts or whatever you want to call it, right? I don't mean to sound elitist, but you know what I'm saying. People who generally just put up selfies and all that now are suddenly full of opinions and grief and sadness about this thing that, patently whatever your take is on this, they clearly don't understand any of it from either perspective, but they're only given one perspective. They have their perspective on it. It's sad and everything else. And I'll get on to the actual shooting in a second and what I think of it. But and I'm going to keep trying to find that thing I was looking for earlier because it is actually important. So forgive me if I just kind of zone out slightly here as I'm looking for it. Hope I find it because it's kind of relevant. And I'm going to lose my train of thought doing this. Anyway, okay, so what was I saying? So it's all over Irish discourse, basically. So it is relevant. It's not an irrelevant thing to Ireland anymore because now Ireland obviously has a a kind of a grown black population. It's enlarged itself there in the last couple of decades, I suppose. And now they are latching onto it as we are racist, we are oppressed, I can't breathe in Ireland type of thing. And all of these kind of white, these Irish kind of progressives and people who want to attach themselves to it are like, oh, I know, I'm listening, I feel your pain, I understand we're very racist, blah, blah, blah. And it's coming, and they will always talk about that a little bit, but they're doing it, it's blowing up now in Ireland because of this. And it's like, what does a shooting of this guy in America have to do with here to start with? I'm still looking for this thing. Damn, I wish I had it now. Because it does kind of matter. Just give me 2 secs. Again, these are cozy streams, and you bear with me. What I'm doing is I'm going through my liked tweets because that's how I kind of save things. Generally speaking, I will do that to try and find things. No, okay, it's gone. Sorry, I won't do that again. So we might as well skip or get on to the kind of presentation, so to speak. Some people will criticize me. You're using American Renaissance. That's a bad source or something. They'll say that because they don't like the facts in it. So they go, oh, and this is rife in discourse about this subject. It's a kind of a thing of, if you want an answer to say that, if you want to say police shootings are racially motivated and discriminatory, you can find a study that says they aren't. You can find a study that says they are. And both actually depend on which way you want to look at it. But you can find a study for either one. It's highly politicized and all of that. So you really just have to look at the facts as much as you can and just use your common sense as well. So you look for sources and evidence, but you also have to kind of use a bit of common sense, because you will find someone telling you both things and both can't obviously be true. So you have to look at it on a kind of holistic level. My take on George Floyd, anyway, it's like I saw the video and it's bad, and I would have that cop or that police officer reprimanded, like that individual case. A lot of these situations, when it happens, you go, it turns out actually that the guy was lunging at the police officer, was trying to take his gun, or was on the run from a murder or something like that. A few days later it comes out and you're like, okay, the video we got was actually just clipped down, and it was a kind of a lie, and it was a media hype sensation. But this one, I haven't seen all there's maybe other circumstances to it about this instance, but definitely the guy didn't need to have his knee on him for like 10 minutes or whatever, right? Okay, an individual instance, that's fine. And I was thinking of like how to address this, because what people will do narrative wise is, because I've seen people do this, they'll point out many instances where white suspects or white people who were having interactions with the police were gunned down, just shot straight in the back while they had their hands up, stuff like that. Equally as the George Floyd shooting, equally egregious. You go, I mean, that's kind of point blank kind of murder, really, like, right? And you see these instances of these white victims of this. And there's loads of them, and I could have brought up 20 of them and gone through all of them. But in a way, what does that do for us? Because it's like someone could go, yeah, but it's more black people, and then someone would go, it's not, or whatever. Sorry, people are saying he wasn't shot. I'm sorry, he was choked. What I'm talking about is people who were killed by police in interactions with the police. They ended up dead, right? So whether it's the reason I kind of slipped up there and said shot is because usually, given that it's America, we're talking about people killed by guns. But yeah, there are some instances where it's choking. There was the guy in New York as well, I think a couple of years ago. That does happen too. So chokeholds, it happens that way too. Anyway, I don't want to say it's irrelevant. I made a mistake there, but in a way it's all the one, right? People getting killed by the police. And Chopper, thank you for letting me know there. So you could look at these various examples of people shot or choked or killed by the police. And I don't know, does that get you anywhere? It's this kind of thing of like, oh, there was a white nationalist killed some people here, and then there was a Muslim killed some people here, and people start sending each other articles back and forth. You kind of have to look at things quantitatively. You have to go to statistics and the like, and just say, listen, let's not exchange sub stories in this kind of battle way. Let's just look at the actual overall situation of what's going on. And what you have to look at is who commits crime in America, and how many people do police shoot of various races and all of that. And then you come up with your answer, because that's the only way. I mean, you can shriek about George Lloyd, and that would be one thing to protest over his death individually. But if you watch the footage coming out of Minneapolis, and of course now it's bleeding into Ireland as well, they're not claiming that a guy was killed, he was black, we think it was because he was black. They're saying there is an overall oppression. We are a oppressed people. We are being murdered in the streets, left, right, and center, and all of that, right? And that's what you're looking at. Yeah, you're not trying to say George Lloyd wasn't choked to death in what could be called a kind of murder, because I'm not denying that. But of course, people of all races have been unfairly killed by police, and police brutality, I suppose you could call it. You have to look at the numbers, and what they're ignoring. And I'm just going to get into it. So I'm going to read some of these out to you. So this is from American Renaissance, and if you go, American Renaissance is a biased site or something like that. Some people just don't like the facts on it, so they discredit the source in some way. All of these are traced back to FBI statistics and various things like that. You can go and find the sources for all these via the website, which I will link once this is uploaded in the description after it's uploaded, so you can come back and find them. But this is just stuff people are completely ignoring. And again, I don't like to dwell on it because I'm not an American. It's not my problem. But then it bleeds into Ireland. So the Color of Crime 2016 revised edition. What have we got? In 2013, of approximately 660,000 crimes of interracial violence that involves blacks and whites, blacks were the perpetrators of 85% of it. I mean, I don't need to comment on this. This meant a black person was 27 times more likely to attack a white person than vice versa. In 2014 in New York City, a black person was 31 times more likely than a white person to be arrested for murder, and a Hispanic was whatever. We're looking at black and white here. We'll keep it simple for this video. For the crime of shooting, defined as firing a bullet that hits someone, a black person was 98 times more likely than a white person to be arrested. And then people say the arrests are biased. That's been disproven, right? If New York City were all white, theoretically, the murder rate would drop by 91%, which is saying that 91% of all the crime committed, or the murder committed in New York City, is by non-white people, which is majority black people, right? And again, this is, I genuinely don't have an issue. I'm not hating on anyone. It's just is what it is. The robbery rate would be 81%, and shootings would drop by 97%. 97%. This is, how can you take on these facts and look at these facts and just you conclude that black people are being hunted? It's the direct opposite. Again, what is it that like 13% of Americans are African American, and African Americans commit 50% of the homicides. So again, it's not only that black people aren't being discriminated against in the way that this whole hype is suggesting they are. It's not only just that, like it's the direct opposite. It's a complete inversion of reality. If the protest were to be had purely on the facts of the matter as they actually are, and not narrative and media spin and competing historical narratives and all that, that's why I'm ignoring, because someone will go, yeah, black people do commit most of the murders, but they were slaves, so they were like, that's the only way, they were impoverished or something like that. None of these things account for it. If you control for poverty among black and white, that doesn't explain it. Whatever, it is what it is. And so that's why I think it's better to just put aside historical competing narratives. Oh, black person will go slavery, and then someone will go, well, Arabs enslaved Africans more, or Africans enslaved each other, like they sold each other off to slave traders. And Japan was nuked in World War II, and they got over it pretty quickly, and all this kind of stuff, right? I'm like, I don't want to go into any of that, or even the causes, what explains these disparities. Let's just, for now, ignore that, right? Ignore all of that, because both sides can play that game. My effort, as usual, with things like this is to say, let's avoid the narrative mess and fuzz, and let's look at some objective statistics and base our conclusions purely on those. Cut history out of it, cut media out of it, because there's a lot of media promoting the Minneapolis narrative and stoking it and all that. Let's just put that aside. Let's just look at the facts. And if the protests and the riots were to be had by, if you were to just and who could disagree with you on this proposal? Let's go into the statistics on this crime and shootings and murder and deaths and being beaten up and everything, right? Violent crime. Okay, so we don't know. We're blind to start with, right? We don't know what it is going to be. You maintain that black people are being attacked or whatever. So you should be very confident going into this game with me. We both go in blind. Then we look at the facts. But before we do that, we agree that, okay, if riots are to be had by a group that is being racially killed at a highly disproportionate level by another group, we'll agree that we will support riots and protests for the group that is being disproportionately attacked and killed and murdered and maimed by another group, right? And the person who wants to do the whole Black Lives Matter and blah, 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 they should be extremely confident. They should say, well, okay, brilliant. Okay, because they could get me then to support them. Because I'm like, if it comes out that it supports your point of view, factually speaking, then I'll join you and I'll bring lots of people and we'll go protest. Surely you want to get another supporter on your side, and how easy it would be. We just have to look at the facts. Let's do it, right? Now, if the person says, I'm not willing to do that, no, I don't agree to that, then the question is, well, then you're full of shit. This is silly. Because obviously if you're not willing to do that, then you might as well be quiet. Stop trying to argue with me. Stop trying to go to a protest, support a rally, weep for people who are oppressed and stuff. There's no point doing that if you're not willing to go into a test of this nature. And then if we do look at it, you will find out what it actually is, and you're left in the same position where your narrative still doesn't make sense. And I've already outlined some of these facts, obviously, and you can see them on screen here. In an all-white Chicago, the murder rate would decline 90%. Also, by the by, there's another stat. I don't have this sourced at the moment, but you could disprove me if you want to. That 97% of black people who are murdered in the United States, I think it might be in Chicago, it might be in a specific place. I've seen 97% used, but the point, let me be safe on this one. The point is that the vast, overwhelming majority of black people who are killed in the United States are killed by other black people. And no one raises a peep about that. But what else have we got? Okay, let's go on to another one. Let's see some more. There's loads here. And I actually don't want to spend too much time on it. There's an AmRen, American Renaissance here with these ones. Interesting. Race, crime, and loathing in Minnesota. So Minnesota is the home state of Minneapolis. This is where all this is happening now. And we have the racial breakdown in Minneapolis is 63% white. So it's a low majority, kind of a low enough majority of white, 63% majority white, 18% black, and a few others, right? And as we can see here are the numbers for homicide with a firearm. The victims are mostly black. The suspects and the arrests are mostly black. And remember, they are 18% of the Minneapolis population. Homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault combined. The victims are mostly white. The suspects and arrests are about 3/4 black. Non-fatal shootings, victims mostly black. Suspects and arrests mostly black. And for homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, auto theft, and arson put together, the victims are mostly white. The suspects and arrests are mostly black. So again, if you were to be having a riot and a thing, it would be white people rioting against this oppression, and not so much oppression. I mean, the ultimate oppression is to be murdered by someone, isn't it? It would be this disproportionate amount of murder and violence and crime that's going on, right? So, I don't know where they're getting it from. It's just a big flip. And if you don't like American Renaissance, Channel 4 News, do Black Americans commit more crime? So this kind of goes on a bit, but so it's one of these fact check things. Okay, so the analysis. It's true around 13% of Americans are Black. And yes, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, hardly in a discredited source, according to that, Black offenders commit 52% of homicides recorded in the data between 1980 and 2008. So it's a little bit old, but, probably still holds true. Only 45% of offenders were white. So whites are grossly underrepresented in murder, right? How are they the bad guys? And like I say, Black people are 52% of the homicides and 32% or 13% of the population. In 2008, the offending rate for Blacks was 7 times higher than for whites, and the victimization rate was 6 times higher. Excuse me. So there's a point here that's important as well. Let me get to it. But academics have noted that the proportion of Black suspects arrested by the police tends to match closely the proportion of offenders identified as Black by victims in the National Crime Victimization Survey. So that kind of discredits the whole idea that, they're just being targeted. Like police officers, hillbillies are going around the place just not liking Black people, so they're just choosing to arrest them and put them away and all that. But no, in national crime victimization, in stuff like homicide, it's not, a thing like that can only be so biased by prejudicial ethnic prejudice or something like that, right? It is what it is. For the majority of people who are convicted for murder, they did the murder, right? So it is what it is. So this doesn't support the idea that the police are unfairly discriminating against the Black population when they make arrests. Again, these are varied sources. Here we have, this is from, I should really have this. Okay, so which one was this? This is a Yale study. Okay, I'll link it afterwards, right? It's a Yale study, and the abstract here says, this paper explores racial differences in police use of force. On non-lethal uses of force, Blacks and Hispanics are more than 50% more likely to experience some form of force in interactions with the police. Adding controls that account for important context, and this is the thing, important context and civilian behavior reduces but cannot fully explain these disparities. On the most extreme use of force, officer-involved shootings, we find no racial differences in either the raw data or when contextual factors are taken into account. We argue that the patterns in the data are consistent with the model in which police officers are utility maximizers, a fraction of which have a preference for discrimination, a fraction, right, who incur relatively high expected costs of officer-involved shootings. The other thing as well is that it's been looked at, and when there's an interaction between a Black civilian and police officers, that a Black cop is more likely to pull the trigger on a Black suspect, whether they're guilty or not or whatever, than a white cop. So again, what's the thing about? Here we have another one. This is from, what do they call themselves again? I know PNAS, but I've forgotten what the acronym is actually for. The National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. So in the conclusion here, there was just something interesting, and I'll get to it. Okay, so we did not find evidence for anti-Black or anti-Hispanic disparity in police use of force across all shootings, and if anything, found anti-white disparities when controlling for race-specific crime. So basically, it's like, this is why I said if you can find a study suggesting either answer if you want to, and the reason you'll find some studies suggesting that yes, discrimination exists in police shootings of black people. Black people are highly overrepresented in how many people get shot by police. If you leave it at that, then that's your answer. But the real answer is to factor for the context. And if you say 13% of Americans who are African American, 13% or 13% do 52% of the homicides, well, that would explain it, right? You know, if when you show up and there's a homicide going on and the person who's committed the homicide is shooting back at you or something like that, and you're going to shoot that person no matter what race they are, well, if that person just happens to be black lots more of the time, then yes, more black people get shot by the police. And they're overrepresented, but the context is everything there, obviously, right? And when controlled for those, they like they've said here, if anything, found an anti-white disparity when controlling for race-specific crime. Again, it is what it is. I've given you Yale. I've given you the American Academy of Sciences. I've given you Channel 4 and American Renaissance. You know, these things are obvious. The other thing as well, just getting away from the kind of the like stats a little bit, is that, you know, if you speak to an Irish person who's been to New York for a couple of years working, or a J1 or something like that, right? They'll say, I think we've all experienced this. They'll say, oh, there are some neighborhoods in America where if you walked into the wrong neighborhood, you could get shot, because Americans are all about shooting people and it's violent and it's crazy, right? That person will never say what they're talking about, really. You know, they're not saying, oh, if you go down to the some strange, I don't know, Greek neighborhood, oh, you walk through there and you're just going to get shot in cold blood. They're going to come out and they're going to go, yo, to you. And no. It's black neighborhoods. It's the idea that if you went into Southside Chicago and just walked through there, mind your own business, just walking from one end to the other, or Harlem or wherever, you're going to get shot and killed. I mean, it's funny how people can they can both entertain that idea in their head while not saying it explicitly, that it's a black neighborhood and you'll go and you'll get killed. And you'll get killed probably specifically because you are white. They can entertain that idea in their head and know that to be true, but then also say that black people are being targeted for murder and all of this, right? And yet not recognize the factual issue at hand there. People just aren't capable. There's so much brainwashing in this whole oppression thing or whatever, that like, it's one thing if people didn't know, but the same person who will tell you that, they'd be like, oh, some neighborhoods you wouldn't go in there, you know, get shot, as if it's almost kind of funny. And it's like, what's funny about that? What's funny about the fact that you just walk through a place and you get shot and murdered for no reason, having done nothing, just because of your race? But it's kind of funny. And then when black people, in the context of black people committing the most crime in the US and getting shot because of these altercations with the police that naturally occur, you're meant to weep and cry and all of this. It's like, and that's not to speak for George Lloyd, that individual case, of course, I think that was misuse of force, whatever. But overall, it's not a thing, basically. I think a lot of you probably know this already, you know. So I don't know. Is there more I can say on this? Oh, here's another one. Just in terms of the riots, it's funny that they're burning buildings down. They are stealing left, right, and center. And you know, I'm sure there'll be a bit of violence going on too as time goes on. But yeah, and they're being violent towards the police at least. And people go, yeah, there are buildings burning down everywhere. Yeah, there are people being robbed. Susan Reynolds says, preaching to the converted here, Gerald. But see, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm hoping that there's some people watching who aren't the converted. So that's why I like to start from scratch a little bit here. But, you know, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So when this is happening, when buildings are being burned down all over the place, they're burning their own neighborhoods as well. People will say, the white kind of liberal will say, I know that's probably not great and all that, but there's been a lot of injustice done, which there hasn't. But anyway, let's put that aside. There's been a lot of injustice done, and there's been a lot of oppression, and these people are hurting, and, you know, all of this, right? So, you know, one of their people got killed. So it's, well, I don't condone that violence and that vandalism and that looting and stuff, destruction of an entire area of a city. I don't quite condone it, but I understand it, and I'm not going to condemn it either, right? But yet, when what was it, like 30 odd children were blown up by jihadis in Manchester, and again, I'm not doing the whole anti-Muslim thing at all. I'm not, but when 30 girls or a large number of kids got killed in Manchester, and this is, you take London Bridge, you take Paris, you take Bataclan, you take Barcelona, you take Berlin, you take all of these things happening for that period. I have a text from someone here saying he wasn't shot. So that was my cardinal error tonight, that he wasn't shot. Yeah, my bad. Sorry, I was reading a lot of the crime stats and stuff, and I just started thinking that way. But yeah, when that was happening, it not only were like the white Brits and French and stuff like that, or let's say non-Muslims, it wasn't just like people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't burn all the buildings down, burn all the mosques or something down." But the algorithm will pick me up saying that. I'm not suggesting that in any way, but just, it wasn't that people were trying to talk the Brits down from doing that. It was a situation where if you said this had something to do with Islam and Muslims, that could get you your job lost, right? That could be a controversy for like a few days after like 30 people have been killed. You're the controversy, like not 24 hours longer than it's happened. There's a controversy about someone said it had something to do with Islam. They're over the actual terrorism that happened, and they're onto the victim blaming thing of like, you're reacting. You should never react. Look at the whole Rotherham, Rochdale and grooming scandal in England. Again, if you were to react to that, not react with vigilante violence or riots or any of that, but just say, I think that's bad and I think that should stop, and here's who did it. That's bad. The discrepancy there and the insanity, it can only be described as insanity. That discrepancy where on one end you couldn't even say what happened, but on the other hand, people are allowed to riot and burn and loot with impunity for something that, when you actually look at it broadly, is not an oppressive systemic type of murdering or something like that going on. So basically, for a non-thing, they can riot, and for a thing that is very, very real, the idea that a bunch of white Brits would get together in a crowd, and even if they didn't commit any vandalism or loot, but they went in their thousands in a crowd shouting and roaring and protesting and hollering and stuff, they would be considered evil Nazis, whatever. But so it's like the discrepancy doesn't make any sense. And of course they would build in the historical oppression narrative, and that itself doesn't make full sense. But excuse me, but it's just mad. It's mad. And I hope I've kind of successfully debunked the whole idea that there is a legitimate protest happening in America with this Minneapolis affair, because it's not legitimate. It is 100% based on lies, and if you're not allowed to call out the lies, basically nobody will point it out. Like, if you put on Fox News or CNN, they'll be debating it in some kind of way, but they won't be discussing, like, they won't just come out and say, can we all just drop this, because we know that 52% of the homicides are black men for the most part, so naturally they're going to end up getting killed more. And even though this case was a legitimate kind of murdering, that also happens to white people now and again. So the argument that George Floyd was killed unfairly may be true, but the jump to say that is some kind of systemic thing or oppression or whatever, which is what the protest is actually about, isn't true. There's no there. I just wanted to make that point and then move on to the Irish section, right? So just to look at all of these Irish, I'm not going to, for those who are wondering, I'm not going to go near any notifications or whatever, so no worries. But I found this one. Basically, a bunch of Irish people went on. Kind of seemed like semi-coordinated. Sorry, my screen is buffering at the moment. I don't know. Am I gone? I hope I'm not. I don't think I am, but I just gotta see. My screen's buffering, so I don't know if I'm live or not. Anyway, I suppose I'll just keep talking. Yeah, there was. Oh, it's really unnerving me here. Anyway, so yeah, it seemed like it kind of coordinated in some way. Maybe it's just natural how it happened, but either way, it happened. That Ireland is racist. Ireland is like, if you think you can point at America and point at their racism and their the oppression of black people, well, don't be so quick to do that, Irishman, because it's happening in okay, thanks. I thought I was gone there, but I just, my screen went and stuff, so I couldn't concentrate. Yeah, so it's like Ireland is so racist too, so we shouldn't be looking over at America. Like, judge yourself first, right? Ireland is deeply racist, has systemic racism at all levels. It's black people. It's like I can't breathe in Ireland as well. This kind of story. I spot critiqued in the chat saying it looked awful kneeling on his neck. I just want to emphasize, to be clear, I think the handling of that situation with George Floyd by that police officer was insane. I was watching it. I think it's horrific to watch. I'm watching it like everybody else was, screaming for the guy, the cop, just to let him go. I think you have him in cuffs anyway. There's like 4 of you there. Just let him go. But again, I've seen videos of, there was her name was Justine. I've forgotten her name. Justine something. It doesn't matter really, but I've seen numerous cases over the past few days that have occurred in recent years of people being gunned down and slain by police in what is like irresponsible / heinous kind of murders. And I'm like, so if the standard is that every time that happens, you freak out. No, you don't. You just say that was bad. That person needs to be prosecuted, whatever. But it's separate. That's separate to the systemic thing. But I just want to make it clear that I'm not excusing or explaining away his, potential murder at this point, right? That's a tragic case and it should be pursued legally and whatever, justice should be sought. But again, that's completely separate to the idea that there was a grand conspiracy of like oppression going on against black people, either in America or Ireland. And I think the argument for America is pretty weak in itself, but it certainly isn't the case in Ireland. And they're just trying to transplant it over here now. So it's basically riding the wave. And I want to show you some examples of it and kind of just look at them. It was all kind of happening on Twitter. So this guy, Tolu Asimota, says, lots of people that are better with words than I am have already touched on the issues of racism the last couple of days. What's going on in America is extremely upsetting, but let's not forget the issues over here in Ireland. And here we have this picture of this poor man here who's been alleged perpetrators of acid attack on teenagers will not be charged. So there was an acid attack and the perpetrators were teenagers, so they were put in juvie, but they weren't convicted properly because of an age thing or whatever, and that was the controversy. But as we can see the story here, so we have this picture. A teenager who suffered life-changing injuries in an acid attack in Waterford has been granted permission, blah, blah, blah. The 2 teenagers who attacked Tega Agber, whatever, I can't pronounce the name, and his friends weren't properly convicted because they were too young, right? Now let's look through some of the important details here. Mr. Justice Charles Meenan also granted one of the boys who was also injured in the acid attack, Padraig O'Sullivan, who is now aged 18, leave to mount a similar legal challenge. So we have Padraig O'Sullivan, and there is another one as well. So we have Padraig O'Sullivan. Now you can, I'm sure you can guess what color Padraig O'Sullivan was. There's another article on this. Yeah, it's basically the point I'm making is that there were 3 victims. Emma Daly's son, Oisin, who's 19, Oisin, yeah, who was also attacked, said she too wants to try to appeal the decision. So we have Padraig and we have Oisin, and then we have what's his name? Tega, right? Now, so 2 out of the 3 victims were white Irish lads. And yet this guy is trying to say racism is very real. Here's my example, Your Honor. Here's the example this guy is submitting to the jury, right? And yet it's a situation where 2 of the 3 people who were attacked were Irish white lads. And that's his case for the racism. And the other thing that's important to note here is that acid attack, Now, it does cross the mind, that acid attack. I wonder who the perpetrators were. Now, I don't want to be flippant. I don't know. It could have been Irish, could have been white, could have been black, whatever. But, you look at some of these stats. In England, we have the ethnicity of the victim in acid attacks. The ethnicity, 45% of the victims are white, and 25% of the victims are African Caribbean, but 38% of the suspects are African Caribbean, and 32% of them are white, of the suspects, right? So, we're talking about a situation where, again, if you look at representation in crime, what you see here is a systemic racist issue of acid attacks in England, where the majority of the victims, or basically where black people are overrepresented as perpetrators and white people are overrepresented as victims in acid attacks. You look at the problem of acid attacks worldwide. So here are the countries where acid attacks are most prevalent. You have the UK and Italy now. Again, I'd say it's probably a largely imported problem. I see some, chat stuff going on there. Work away. But so most people understand that it's a South Asian problem, an Indian thing, Pakistani, kind of West African, Nigerian thing, right? So it's reasonable to suspect that, statistically speaking, there's a high enough likelihood or a good reason to believe that the perpetrator was potentially black themselves. So, and we just don't know. We don't know the answer to that. But and I'm not going to claim it was, because I don't know. But what I'm saying is we could potentially have a situation where, potentially, because we don't know, we could have a situation where the perpetrator was black, and of the victims, two of the three victims were white, but the perpetrator was black. But yet still, if I'm correct on that, and even so, the victims were 2/3 white anyway, so that alone debunks it. But it's like, again, we have that, and yet it gets picked up and like, oh, Ireland's so racist, and you're like, this is what you have to go on. This is preposterous. That's what you have to go on. What's the next one we have here? So, and yeah, again, there's just more on acid attacks being, it's largely a kind of a third world or kind of a southern hemisphere developing country kind of issue, you could say. The next one we have is a 14-year-old girl. So this is another person who's gotten 1,000 likes or whatever. A 14-year-old girl was jumped and beaten by a gang of teens because she was wearing a hijab. This didn't happen in America or the UK. This happened in Dundrum. Ireland is a racist, bigoted country, and racism is rife, right? And here's the story. Gardaí probe shocking footage of alleged Islamophobic attack in Dundrum. Now, we don't have any verification of this. The attack happened, we can assume. But in the shocking video emerged yesterday, showing a small group of young males appearing to hit a young teenager as she and a friend were walking through Dundrum. The girl appears to have been pelted with eggs, while a hijab she was wearing was then forcibly removed from her head by teenage boys. Gardaí have identified a gang of up to 9 teens who had earlier been involved in a crime spree in the hours preceding the attack. So they were on a crime spree in general. We have a gang of like 10 scumbag little scuts, right? Who go around breaking windows, robbing people, punching people, whatever, right? That's basically said here, right? So they're on a crime spree all day long. You can imagine that was a varied, multifaceted crime spree. And then at one point, I'm sure they punched some guy and took his bag and ripped his jacket off and, kicked him and then smashed some windows and threw a rock at a car or whatever. And then at some point they come across a girl in their crime spree who happens to be wearing a hijab, and they fucking, sorry for the language, but they grab her by it, or they rip it off, or they push her, punch her. It's there, so it ends up getting taken. It looks quite obvious to me that they didn't go out, with like crusaders in the morning, putting on their the Knights of the Crusaders or whatever gear, and start like, blaspheming the Muhammad or the Prophet Muhammad and all of this stuff, right? These kind of anti-jihad crusaders. No, this is just a bunch of little scuts who were attacking people all day, and one of them happened to end up being Muslim, and she happened to have a hijab on. So it kind of got caught in the crossfire, right? Type of thing. It's like that. This shows how much these people have nothing to go on, and it's so ridiculous. Even in the American case, they basically have nothing to go on, but certainly not in Ireland. And then just interestingly, this is from 2018. Woman verbally abused and thrown off her bike outside a Dublin mosque. A woman was told she was allegedly verbally abused, or told how she was allegedly verbally abused and attacked while out for a cycle in Earlstown. The woman, known only as Rosie, claimed she was out for a cycle when she passed the Islamic Centre and was confronted by two men. They pushed her off the bike down the embankment and onto the path. Blah, 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 right? So Irish woman Rosie, we can assume, attacked. Again, this is alleged, but all these things are alleged, whatever. But if we're going to assume this happened, then there are other instances of violence and attacks from ethnically non-white or Irish people to whatever. I'm just pointing out an example of it. Now, if this alleged attack, which actually probably wasn't religiously or ethnically motivated anyway, but if you're going to put that down, submit it to the jury as proof of a what? Ireland is a racist, bigoted country and it's rife, to point out some systemic, rampant phenomenon. Well, then, if that's the case, then this counts too, doesn't it? Like, right? It's just complete nonsense. But there's some more here. I hope Irish people don't just direct their attention and efforts towards America. Ireland has normalized racism and xenophobia, and it's integrated into our society. Yet no one speaks up about it. Integrated into our society. It's insane. It's the complete opposite. Excuse me. We are not innocent to those events, and I hope we can actually make a change. To make a change, like we must heal. We must, all this. It's like we don't have a history of. There was no slavery here. What are you talking about? What it ultimately demonstrates is the Americanization of culture. And the inability of people to think outside narratives like the Holocaust, like American slavery, like whatever, this kind of stuff. These people are radicalized via the education system and television and all of that. People are completely radicalized where they don't even know what's going on. They have absolutely no idea what's going on. They don't know how to make sense of anything, and yet they are strident in their beliefs and hysterical, I suppose you could say, or fanatical. So it's a strange situation. This person who looks to be African origin, she's black, right? I'll never forget when my principal pulled apart my pick and drop. It's probably some African hair thing because it didn't fit the school's rules. Now that's one of those things. It's like, whatever. Like, first off, it's against the school rules. It is what it is, right? And the other thing is, like, we can all remember something in school where you were maybe you were embarrassed or you were treated very poorly. A time a teacher did this or that, or stood you up and like made a disgrace of you or targeted you in some way like that, and you felt like it was bad and whatever. That happens to everybody. And yet she's taking this one instance because, of course, the effort is not to see if there's a systemic problem of some description, right? Which I reject anyway, the idea of it. But it's what they're doing is they have the prefit narrative of I can't breathe or whatever, and then they need to attach something onto it. And despite Ireland being a friendly, welcoming, warm place, which has treated them very well and welcomed them in to the country, they're determined to villainize us like this. I mean, it's a dangerous situation going forward, and it's only going in one direction. And here's what she says. This is very interesting. This person is claimed to have gone to school in Ireland, right? So they've been here a long time, but yet see how she ends this one. I don't have the actual, I'm all over the place tonight. I don't have the actual stuff up. I should be showing it to you. So she says, so she says, I'll never forget when my principal got me to take my hair down or whatever because of school rules. So she's been to school in Ireland. She's integrated or has been in Ireland for a while. She should ostensibly be saying Irish, I'm Irish, or something like that. And she says, racism exists in Ireland. They're just more discreet with it. They are just more discreet with it. So she's very keenly aware of they are just more discreet with it. And she's talking about Irish people. And she's saying it exists in Ireland. I don't know. That's what we're dealing with. And yet we're the bad guys. So what do we have next? This person here, I shouldn't even bother with this stuff. It's like, it's all flimsy. There's nothing to it or at all. I'm just going to skip that one. The white people in Ireland saying racism doesn't exist here are actually funny. I mean, you have to be careful not to break the terms of service here. You could be provoked into giving an answer here, you know, with the way these people are so derogatory and hateful towards Irish people. This woman here says her black boyfriend, who is apparently the biggest Gael Gord that ever existed, and he exists, he was told to go back to his own country by a 7-year-old. So are we meant to, like, you know, drop a knee for the guy who has said something, who apparently exists, who was told something by a 7-year-old? It's like the slavery, 12 years a slave all over again. This is the person who tweeted that. These are the type of fanatics we're dealing with. For everyone tweeting about how racism in America is so awful, it's important to remember that the UK and Ireland are also not exempt. You're not exempt, lads. Alt-right racist views have been predominant here for years. Imagine racist views being predominant in Ireland. Yeah, they give a note about a lyric in a song, like some song has the N-word in it. And then you have this, I found this young fella interesting. I'm not trying to pick on someone or anything, but like, this is a funny example where this guy's, I haven't suffered from racism, but multiple of my teammates have been called racial slurs while playing football and nothing is being done about it. Ireland is still racist. Anyone who's a minority in Ireland has their own story, so start listening. It's like, again, is that true? I don't know. If it is, it's on the pitch stuff. I mean, people call each other slurs of pretty much every description on a pitch to, like, get a psychological advantage, whatever. But regardless, it's hardly something. It's hardly like, you know, the next Holocaust or whatever. But I looked at this guy and I thought, he's like, his profile picture. Again, this is a young fella. I'm not targeting him. It's just a point of interest. He's here with his, like, black buddy, and he's like, over to his black buddy, I've got a black friend. His profile picture is a black basketball player. I don't know, is that Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan? I don't really know or care, but it's a black basketball player. It's Bryant, I think I can see there. And then you go in, it's like something about, meme about something about racism and more about racism, black people. I don't know, is it TikTok culture or what is it? But like, these people are radicalized fanatics. They don't know anything. Bear in mind the stats I was telling you about earlier in terms of crime and police shooting and all of that. It's completely all built on sand, and yet these people are fanatical. And it's a lot of young people, and again, it's infiltrated. It's political activists and NGOs and all of that, but it's also crept into the kind of boo-hoo culture, the Instagram, TikTok culture. They're all hyped up on it. You're nothing if you haven't shown off your accessory of your virtue signal about this and that and the other. And it used to just be a virtue signal, but now you have to be fanatical about it. The most self-hating, whatever. And these people have no grounding in reality on this at all. And someone's directing them. Some kind of media history narrative that they've been absorbing their whole life is directing them. The idea that you should leave people to be influenced by an open market of culture is bullshit, because these people are influenced by something, you know, a specific agenda. So I would, you know, I think like young people need to be directed in some way, because a vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum. And it's like, in this vacuum, this is what these people worship now and get emotional about and believe in as a better future. It's their entire world. For some reason, black people in America, it's not so much Uyghurs in China or Pashtuns in Afghanistan or a certain tribe in South America. No, it's black Americans. For some reason, it's you have to think about this as a massive, like, mass psychosis. The fact that in Ireland, thousands of miles away from America, you have these young thoughts and like dipshit young fellas and stuff like that, and adults as well, older people, but a lot of young people absorbed and obsessed with this actually non-existent oppression of a certain group of people thousands of miles away. You know, that isn't even real anyway in the first place. It's worrying. Ireland is not a racist country, but when the owner of a local DIY store did blackface to push Black Friday sales, my entire hometown defended him because it was, quote, funny and people are snowflakes. No, it's racism, Karen. So again, she's using the kind of derogatory racial slur against white women. So she's signaling, I'm so against Karens. I'm a white woman, but I'm so against Karens. But I am you know, I'm not even going to look at this person's picture because that would be insulting. But it's like, again, this person's example. So they're trying to basically imbue themselves with a reason to be like roots or anti-slavery or some kind of oppression, like get out kind of level of like there is this horrible evil oppression going on and it's my people are doing it. She desperately wants to be able to grasp onto something like that. And the best example she can come up with is a local DIY store. It's Black Friday, and I'm assuming the owner or someone in the store, as a promotional thing, did blackface. Now, I'm assuming they didn't do the whole, what is it? That whole, the one with the, the older fashioned one. I'm assuming the person just put on brown tan and probably put on chains and, chains and baggy pants and went, yo, man, and all this kind of stuff, being like a rapper or something, right? Which isn't insulting at all, really. It's like it's like we're constantly saturated in hip hop culture. Why wouldn't we engage in it or caricature it or play along with it? And so this blackface, I'm sure, wasn't some like, I forget what the word is for that kind of old caricature, the one that is they used to do like 100 years ago. But I'm assuming it wasn't that. I'm assuming it was like, I'm Kanye West or whatever type of thing. And that's all she has to grab onto. Like, Ireland is a racist country. We need to heal. People can't breathe. It's people, and she wants to say people are being killed or something like that. But the best you can think of is a local DIY store that threw on a bit of bronzer or tan to look like a rapper, probably because it's like, yo, it's Black Friday, and yet. So it's pathetic in its own way as well. They want it, but this will continue to go on. We're only going in one direction, both in America and Ireland. We're going to have the same thing eventually, right? I'm sure a police officer, a guard in Ireland, is going to at some point kill a working class white person because they're armed these days, and they'll be in gangland stuff. And at some point they will shoot and kill a white working class Dubliner who had nothing to do with the gang stuff, and he'll end up being killed, right? That'll happen, and it'll be like, oh, that was an injustice. Let the courts do their thing. It happened, and it might happen a second time. Same thing. Oh, that was an injustice. It happened. Blah blah blah. Wires crossed. Tragedy / kind of manslaughter, and it happened. But then inevitably, just as the odds would tell you, at some point that'll end up being a black person, and then North Inner City Dublin or Balbriggan starts to burn. And we all have to atone and all of this kind of stuff. And what will be attached onto it is that there has been a systemic thing always in Ireland, and it is in our essence, it's in our core, a form of malevolence or hatred, and our entire society is rife and rotten through with this. And it won't really be the case, just like with George Floyd, that was a bad instance, but these things happen. It happens to white people as well. And yet now they have the what is it, the casus belli or whatever, I forget, I don't know the phrase. They have the justification to go for it, and that's what it is. And it is just ethnic, racial resentment of some description, and it's completely unfounded in Ireland. But you can see, because of something that happened, which was even a non-issue over there really, but because of something that happened thousands of miles away in Minnesota, right? Ireland is now, getting in position for our own version of it. It's not good. And I'll resist it all the way, always like I'm in my own country, that's how I feel about it. Here's another one. A trans person who was in direct provision died, basically. That's what happened. So that's apparently the Holocaust or the 12 years a slave in Ireland. A trans person who is black died in direct provision direct provision. Okay, that happened. And I mean, rest in peace to that person, of course, for all people who died, but like it happened. Okay. I hope Irish people don't just direct their attention towards America. Have I read this one already? Ireland has normalized racism. Imagine the concept. Imagine saying with a straight face that Ireland has normalized racism. Like if you were living in the real world, knowing all of the television, the propaganda, the education system, just general culture, and just the way Irish people are. Irish people aren't naturally, hateful towards people in any way, right? Imagine with a straight face saying that Ireland has normalized racism and xenophobia. Like, what? And it's integrated into our society, yet nobody speaks up about it. Oh man. So it's integrated into our society. It's pervasive, but no one speaks up about it. Nobody dares say that Ireland's racist. You wouldn't risk it, right? um, Nobody wants to speak up. Nobody wants to raise their hand. And what is that thing they say? They say, speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. Fist up in the air, flower in the gun barrel, all the accoutrements and fashion that comes with. I am. I've seen people in Minnesota at these riots. They're kind of drunk and they're on the guy Unicorn Riots kind of streams, and they're drunk off their arses on the camera. They're like, yo, 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 yo. They probably have a TV in their hand, and they're going, and they're freaking out, and they're like hyperventilating on, this is history, because in their mind history is defined as putting a flower in a gun. And then there's these white idiot girls there as well, young ones, and they all want to be part of this history because they see the history as kind of predetermined in this way, according to this narrative. No matter what the facts are, it doesn't matter. This is history, and it is, you are exalted if you are part of it. To be part of it is to actualize yourself, particularly as a white person, in a way, to say, this is history, I am in history, I am taking part in it. And history is a building burning down and riot police standing there and you throwing something and you holding your fist up in the air, and it's a complete fashion accessory. It's two things. On one end, it's a fashion accessory, but on another end, it's a deeply like metaphysical thing, like where it is actually, it's not just fashion. It's actually the closest thing these people have to what you could call a religious feeling, and a kind of a transcendent feeling of like, it's like someone, it's like an owl one. Not that it's just an owl one, but it's like someone going to Lourdes and finding this Zen moment, this like, the heavens are singing kind of moment, in Lourdes or whatever, or a Muslim going to Mecca doing the Hajj. That's what these people are like when they're at these things, and they have absolutely no idea what's going on or what's true or what isn't. These people have been made insane by this messaging that they've absorbed their whole lives from every angle: advertising, education, whatever. And what was my point? Oh yeah, the key thing as well is that and this is the point, we have in Ireland a bunch of people who are, as much as the Americans, I maintain, don't have just cause for any of this. Even if you could argue that they do in some way, the Irish people definitely don't. And with this metaphysical religious belief thing they have, and it's a kind of a fashion thing, you have Irish people with a big hole in them, and they desperately want to fulfill it. So what they're doing now, just to see them with all these tweets and this kind of atmosphere, is these people desperately trying. They want so much for there to be someone killed, or and they want there to be a rally where they're standing up against the power, where they can rally and they can throw something at a car, or they can say, I'm standing with my, person of color oppressed friend, and I will stand in front of them, and I'll be the kind of like white savior. And there's a hole in them, and they desperately need it, and that's occurring at the same time so there's a hole in these people, and they want to fill it that way. And then at the same time, you have this set of Black people in Ireland who have a similar but slightly different feeling of resentment, right? They don't feel like they quite belong because it is what it is. It's not because anyone's doing anything. In fact, efforts are being made to the contrary to make them welcome and whatever. None of us are racist, all of that. But no matter how much we ever pander, or no matter how much we ever say, oh, Wanja, you're as Irish as myself, you're more Irish than my granddad or whatever, as much as we do that and plumos and share the bag of potatoes and all that, and even if so-and-so can speak Irish and play hurling and stuff, there will always be a kind of a natural reality that people will go, you may be Irish, you may be a citizen, all that. I may not even harbor any resentment or overly ethnocentric feeling, but it's inescapable that there is this knowledge between everyone that I'm Irish, and you're immigrant descended or whatever. There's that kind of thing. And even if the Irish, white Irish, are determined to think otherwise, and even if they deeply do feel otherwise, even to their core, if they believe otherwise, the Black people in Ireland will feel different. And that's not even to get into disparate outcomes that may occur. Let's not get into it. But these things will always be there no matter what you do. And Black people will need to fill that gap in themselves, this kind of certain sense of alienation or whatever it is, with this narrative of we are being racially discriminated against, racism's everywhere, blah, blah, blah. And they will, so you have these two groups coming together and they will destroy our society. And again, if people think I'm being racist to say that, I'm specifically talking about the white Irish cohort, the ones who want to play along with all this stuff and gin it up. They're the more responsible for this stuff, really. So I don't know. Even though we don't have the police shooting people, and we don't even have this thing yet of black crime. Well, no, some people would say we do, but we don't have it like Southside Chicago has it, or parts of New York and Baltimore and all of this, right? But as we have some of that, and then naturally we will have policing issues, because, like you say, if it goes like America, where 52% of homicides are committed by 13% of people, naturally the policing, either you ignore it, which can't be done, or you have to rub up against it in some way, and there are going to be things will spill over now and again. So we're going the same direction. So basically my point is, as it stands, there is, even though there is nothing to speak of like this in Ireland to grasp onto, no matter how much these people want to, they're trying hard now. Wait until they have a little nugget of something and blah, blah, blah. And the demographics go against us even more as they are already. Point being, Ireland is going squarely in one direction. Like, there is no two ways about it. So when you tonight or tomorrow morning look at the footage of Minneapolis, make no mistake, this is your country in the future, your city, your neighborhood potentially. And there's only so many places to run in what is a small little country. So yeah, I don't know. That's the way it's going. And if that's the funny thing is that I know that to be true, and these white progressive, like, religious believers in this narrative, they believe it. Black people in Ireland believe it. We just believe it from a different perspective, right? But they believe it to be true too. They want it. They desperately want it. I ideally don't want it, but I know it's just going to happen outside my control anyway. So I think most people can agree there's not many people who would argue. It would want to be some kind of deranged classical liberal to argue that for some reason this isn't the direction we're going in. Now, we could argue as to the speed or something like that, but that it is the direction we're going in is a certainty. And I think most people would agree with that, albeit possibly from differing perspectives on it, but they would agree. How can that be a good thing? And who's responsible for this? I don't want to live in that society at all. And these resentments are insoluble. There's no way around them. America can't deal with it. We're definitely not going to be able to deal with it. Why are we doing this to ourselves? We could halt immigration now. We could try and just say, okay, who's here is here. Let's just leave it at that, right? And let's have a somewhat pluralistic society, whatever, but let's just shut the doors, right? Whether you're black, white, I think we can agree now to go down the road of America when we could just avoid it. We could just stay where we are and not create these massive ethnic enclaves and all of this stuff. We could avoid that with the push of a button, with the sign of a pen, with the say, and it wouldn't even have to necessarily involve deporting anyone. Some people would say we should deport people, but even if you didn't, you could just say, well, no, we'll just freeze as we are. But yet, even that suggestion now is itself racism. I mean, for sure. If someone came out and said, I think we should have no more immigration or net neutral, specifically from the more ethnically diverse or apart from Irish people, the potential immigrants are, the less it lends itself to a kind of a harmonious future in terms of demographic friction, right, which exists in America and England and everywhere in France now. So like, no immigration in general, whether you're white, black, or in between, but particularly like we shouldn't, basically what I'm saying is that the admission should be not that we're against people who aren't Irish, or not that color of the skin matters too much, or the racial background, and that we're obsessing over it and we're trying to kick people out and we're trying to whatever. No, just the very simple admission that, and this is a simple, humble, but yet obvious and factual admission, to just say, here's what it is. Diversity is not our strength, right? Simple. Just to say, we don't have to, the policies don't have to be that harsh or anything like that, but let's just all, whether we're black, white, or whatever in Ireland, let's just come together and admit in unity in a certain way. Let's just say, let's just meet each other and say, lads, let's just admit it, right? We can get along great, but like diversity in and of itself is not our strength. It's probably a massive detriment. It's a bad thing, right? Insofar as it exists, you just deal with it, and you try to be diplomatic and all of that and get on in a kind of pluralistic way. But insofar as it being a potential thing that you can either have more of in the future or not have more of, let's just say it's probably something you wouldn't want to have more of. Can we all agree on that, right? Factually speaking, no. But that's all. That's a story for another day. I mean, different groups compete and all of this, so there's nothing can be done about it in that way. It's just a shit show, and Minneapolis is the future, and that it's not good for anybody. Pity people won't listen to nationalists and just basically people who are kind of essentialists and people who look at human nature and reality as it's actually happening, and just try to make a more ideal world for everybody based on what's actually really happening and what actually is. But we don't. And here we have these radicalized young people who are determined to believe in this fanatical religion of, I don't know. And ultimately what they're talking about is race war. Again, the algorithm might pick up on me saying that, right? I'm not saying it, right? But what these people are talking about, they might be saying it from a perspective of white Irish are racist against la, 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 la. That's kind of neither here nor there. What they're ultimately stoking and pushing at is the idea of race war, racial conflict. One person says the oppression is this way and that way, but either way, what they're doing is talking about it. So it's not me. And that's why when people say, oh, why don't you just shut up? You're terrible and all that. I'm like, listen, you can shoot me tomorrow morning, but what I'm saying won't go away just because I don't say it. It's not my utterance of it that creates it, or someone like me with a bigger platform who maybe says the same thing. It's not our utterance of it that makes it so. It is so, and we say it. It's the other way around. And it's like, so you could shoot me in the morning, but like it's still going to be there. So I don't know what value that is. But all we can do is keep kind of speaking the truth about it and stand up to it a little bit. And that's what I'm just trying to do tonight in my own little small way, and just keep y'all as entertained with a bit of rambling for the before the weekend. So yeah, I'll kind of leave it there. The chat seems to be going absolutely wild fast. Oh no, it just was catching up to itself. I thought I was very popular there for a second because I was going, there's 80, 90 of you there. It was just catching up. But yeah. Last True Gale says, meanwhile, all these marketing and media companies have coaching media and marketing around them. Yeah, they do. I mean, I would say it's not something to worry about. It's just one of those things, like, I don't know. I do look at Minneapolis and just say, listen, I'm not trying to say Minneapolis is going to happen in 2 weeks' time. All I'm saying is that whether it's 2 weeks' time or whether it's 2 millenniums' time, just to be a bit extreme about it, whether it's 2 minutes or 2 millennia away, I'm not trying to say it's happening tomorrow. I'm just trying to say that whatever timeline you feel, most people would probably agree 30 odd years probably when we're at that level. But the question of that direction being locked in is unarguable. And I just, again, my thing is not to be mad ethno-nationalist and all this, or that kind of thing. It's just I'm more humble in my approach. It's just to be like, listen, can we just talk about what all I can do is talk about what I know to be, or think at least to be true as I currently am, and all I can do is say what I believe in that sense. And I don't know, it just feels wrong not to, or whatever. All you can do is just speak it like it is. But here's the thing as well. If you want a, I'm treading in very dangerous waters here, but this could be some consolation to those of you who think, oh my God, what's going to happen? there's only so far this stuff can push. You look at a place like Uachtarard. You remember when Uachtarard got organized, you know that picture of them all walking down that main road. Now, they were just fighting against inhumane direct provision, right? Of course. But, you know, when our own people get organized, I mean, our own people are incredibly tolerant, like pathologically to an absolute fault tolerant. But there's a certain limit where people start to say, my neighborhood is under attack. I'm under attack from my government and all of this kind of stuff, where they just kind of say, okay, I'm constantly afraid of marketing and all of that, but marketing and media and bullying and brainwashing and all of this stuff, psychological warfare from government and Storyful and everything. But there's a certain point where if you're pushed far enough, and there was a little flash of it in Uachtarard where they said, I know you're terrorizing us and you're trying to get us all to go home, but it's too egregious, and you know, we're just going to march on the place. And they had schedules and everything, and they had tents and food. It was so well set up. It would put something like Minneapolis to shame, because they, and this is all I'll say, is that they were incredibly organized, far more organized than something like Minneapolis, and in a way far more determined, and they knew exactly what was being done against them. So I don't know, there is, you know, there's a point at which Irish people will just kind of go, okay, and I don't know when that point is, but they'll just go, okay, this is bullshit. And all the time you thought they were manipulated by all this stuff and they actually kind of believed it, you will suddenly realize that there's millions of people across the country who will suddenly go, they'll kind of flick the switch and go, I was pretending for like the last 20 years. I just kind of kept my head down to go along with this bullshit. And I kind of half believed it. I don't know. I didn't care. But once you push me past a certain point, I'll just go, I don't care anymore. I want to know who the nationalist is. I want to know who the person here is who will defend my, you know, if you have things like Rotherham happening in your neighborhood, people just go, I just want to know who can stop this. I don't care about any of the bullshit. I don't even care. I'm not overly racist or ethno-nationalist or any of that. I'm definitely not a progressive universalist. I just don't care. I'm not afraid. They'll say, I'm not afraid to be called racist or thisist or thatist or whatever. I don't care. I'm just a sensible person, and what's being done is preposterous and I'm against it. And I am now on the street and I'm not going anywhere. And that'll happen, you know. And that is what you would call a genuine protest, one that isn't facilitated by the media and all of that. But there will be a certain point where the media trying to put the cat in the bag won't work anymore. People go, I don't care what the media says. I don't care what the headline is. I don't care what the government says. I don't care about an NGO. I'm here and I'm staying. You saw a little bit of that in Uachtarard, and it was completely grassroots populist. People said that I was directing it and I was this and that, right? There was a little bit of involvement on my behalf. I was familiar with some people and all of that. But what's amazing is that I'm not even an organization. I'm just one guy. But they were so grassroots that it was even beyond me. Like, they were just operating by themselves. It didn't have a name or a political group or whatever. They just were what they were. You see these moments. So I do think there's just a bit of national populism will arise in its own way to deal with this stuff as time goes on. And it will be very much like not a gradual thing. It'll be pushed all the way, and then there'll be a sudden thing. And it'll just be like, okay. And it'll gain a critical mass to the point where to be part of it is it's beyond the point of being afraid to be part of it, because it's like everybody just decides at once almost to just say, all right, screw it. And people think that, oh no, that'll be a terrible event or something. It's not. People think it's some historical thing of some mass barbarism or cruelty. No, it'll just be standing up to it going, no, you people are out of power. Basically, the word racism has run out of business. It's gone bankrupt. It's gone. We'll be reasonable. We won't be hateful towards anyone. But the idea that we'll say rational things and you'll call us racist, and here's what it'll look like. And I've seen this happen, and I will shut up in a sec now. Here's what it looks like in the end. Is where, in the end, calling somebody racist will be more of a socially. Calling somebody racist will be a greater social taboo than being called racist. Do you get me? It'll be more costly to your everything to call somebody racist than to be called racist. That, to me, in a way, and I'm just kind of riffing here, but like, to me, that's one of those narrative flips that once a simple thing like that happens, that kind of moment of enlightenment, then at least we can have a reasonable discussion of what to do going forward, and people will be liberated. Lads and ladies, I'm gonna go have my weekend now. It's gonna be a good one. I assume it's gonna be nice and sunny. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back on Monday, or well, Monday, Tuesday. I'll probably come back Monday. Yeah. Look, everything I said tonight, I do just kind of ramble a bit. I don't know. I don't take it as like articles of like penned exact. For example, towards the end there, I'm just kind of thinking out loud as well. But yeah, and not that I disavow anything. It's all what I kind of believe. But just don't take it as like a massive like worked out thing. So you get what I'm saying. Critiques, Last True Gale, all the others, loadsy there. Appreciate it. I'm gonna say thanks for watching, and Ihawa. Have a good weekend. See you.